At the end of each long day, when the world seems to stretch itself into the soft glow of evening, I like to sit quietly and feel my thoughts settle, one by one, like small feathers drifting to the ground. I often notice how the mind changes its rhythm at this time, how the pace that carried me through daylight begins to slow, becoming almost shy in the way it moves through the quiet. I've come to appreciate this shift because it gently reminds me of something studied again and again. In psychology, the mind is naturally drawn toward calm when given space. It doesn't need force. It doesn't need demands. It only needs room to breathe. As I sit in this evening calm, I often pay attention to the simple way thoughts begin to soften. Psychologists sometimes describe this as a transition state, a moment when the brain shifts from active problem solving into a more restful mode, supported by slow alpha waves that naturally drift through the edges of awareness. These waves appear when the mind relaxes, when nothing urgent asks for attention, when breathing becomes steady and slow without any effort from me. I like how gentle that is, how the brain quietly guides itself into a more peaceful rhythm. The moment it senses that it is safe to let go, I find comfort in noticing this, because it reminds me that rest is not something I have to create. It is something the brain instinctively moves toward, like a river searching for the ocean. Even small moments of stillness encourage this shift. Researchers often talk about how even 1 or 2 minutes of simply sitting in silence can help the nervous system reset its pace, lowering tension and inviting the mind to drift more easily. In the soft glow of nighttime, this feels even more pronounced, as though the quiet around me gently supports the quiet within me. When I think about this natural movement toward rest, I also remember something else psychologists often mention. The mind loves patterns that feel safe. Whenever I return to the same small rituals at night, sitting in the same comfortable place, breathing in the same slow way, the brain recognizes these signals. It begins to prepare for calm, even before I consciously ask it to. This idea always feels comforting, like knowing that the mind is an old friend who understands the meaning of familiar gestures. The moment the body begins to slow down, the mind follows, easing itself into a softer state, ready to drift into dreams. Sometimes, while sitting quietly, I reflect on how memories tend to surface more gently in moments like this. There is something almost tender about the way the brain lets old thoughts rise when everything around me is peaceful. Psychology research suggests that when the mind relaxes, the default mode network becomes more active, a group of interconnected regions that help me reflect, imagine, wander mentally from one idea to the next. In calm moments, this network lights up softly, allowing thoughts to float by without urgency. I find this comforting because it means that peaceful reflection is a natural part of who we are. The mind enjoys these slow, drifting moments, where it can wander without pressure or direction. In the hush of this nighttime quiet, my breathing deepens. I notice how each inhale feels cool and each exhale feels warm, as though I'm gently exchanging the day's weight for something softer. Psychologists often describe slow exhalations as a natural signal to the body that it is safe. The nervous system responds by shifting into a calmer state, easing tension in the muscles, steadying the heartbeat, and lowering overall stress. I don't have to force anything. The body knows exactly how to relax. When given the smallest invitation, there is something deeply soothing about how predictable this is. The body has spent thousands of years learning how to rest, long before I ever had to think about self-care or bedtime routines. When I breathe slowly, the heart follows. When the heart slows, the mind follows. It is a delicate harmony that happens every night, whether or not I notice it. And the more I pay attention, the more comforting it becomes. As I sit in this soft atmosphere, I sometimes notice the faint hum of thoughts that try to linger from the day, tasks I didn't finish, conversations I replay, questions that return even after I've tried to let them go. But even these thoughts feel different in this quiet. They aren't loud or demanding. They drift like small echoes. Psychology teaches that when the mind begins to relax, it naturally replays lingering thoughts in a slower, more gentle form. This is not a sign of stress. It's simply the mind sorting its experiences, placing things into order so that rest can deepen. Knowing this always helps me let those thoughts pass by without clinging to them. There is another simple truth that often helps me settle into calm. The mind doesn't hold on to negative thoughts as tightly when the body feels safe. Safety is a powerful psychological anchor. It creates a sense of stability that quiets worry. When the room is dim, when sounds are soft, when breathing is slow, the nervous system interprets these cues as signs of protection. And once the body believes it is safe, the mind has little reason to keep old tensions alive. The grip loosens. Thoughts slip through the fingers. Everything becomes softer around the edges. I like knowing that this is a natural process. It means I don't have to push my thoughts away or silence them. I only need to let calm rise slowly, like water filling a quiet pond. The rest takes care of itself. This gentle understanding helps me ease into the night without effort. I feel like I'm simply allowing my mind to be what it already wants to be, peaceful, steady, and ready to drift. Sometimes I notice how my eyelids become naturally heavier during these moments of quiet. Not because I force them closed, but because the body recognizes the slowing of the mind and responds instinctively. Psychology often describes this as the beginning of the hypnagogic state, that dreamy space between wakefulness and sleep. It's a place where imagination becomes soft and fluid, where thoughts blend with images without clear boundaries. This state is known for its creativity, its calm, and its gentle warmth. Many people experience floating sensations, drifting lights, or soft sounds that feel like distant memories. These sensations are completely natural, and they show that the brain is easing itself into sleep. There is something deeply comforting about knowing that the mind creates this gentle state every night. It feels like a soft bridge between the day and the world of dreams, a place where reality loosens just enough to let imagination glow. I like letting myself drift near this space, even before sleep fully arrives, because it feels like being surrounded by quiet starlight, warm, slow, and endlessly peaceful. As I breathe in the calm of this moment, I sometimes think about how many psychology studies emphasize the power of small, predictable routines. The brain relaxes when it sees patterns, when it recognizes familiar steps that lead toward rest. This is why simple rituals, dim lights, steady breathing, soft reflections can soothe even a busy mind. They signal a shift, gently telling the brain that it can release the energy of the day. I often reflect on how soothing it is, that the mind doesn't need anything complicated to find peace. It only asks for consistency. A quiet moment, a steady breath, a calm intention. These small actions become silent invitations for rest, and the brain accepts them with surprising ease. Sitting here now, letting the night deepen around me, I can feel the day drifting away. Thoughts untangle, the air cools, and the soft rhythm of my breathing becomes the only thing I need to notice. The mind settles naturally, peacefully, without urgency or expectation. I simply let the calm unfold, and in the gentle quiet of this moment, I feel ready to drift deeper into the soft patterns of thought that lead toward sleep. When the night stretches itself quietly across the sky, I often find my attention drifting toward the gentle rhythm of my breath. There is something endlessly soothing about noticing how air enters and leaves the body, how each inhale feels like a soft wave drawing in, and each exhale feels like a quiet tide drifting outward. In moments like these, I remember how deeply connected breathing is to peace, and how psychology has spent so many years observing something that humans have known instinctively for centuries. The breath is the anchor of calm. As I settle into this calm space, I like to start by simply noticing the way breathing slows without force. At first, the pace might still carry traces of the day, slightly uneven, slightly hurried, but gradually, as the mind moves into softer territory, the breath begins to lengthen on its own. Researchers often explain this as a shift in autonomic balance, when the sympathetic nervous system, which keeps us alert, gently begins to fade, allowing the parasympathetic system to take the lead. This transition is subtle, almost imperceptible, yet its impact is profound. The body interprets slower breathing as a sign that everything is safe. Muscles loosen, heartbeats soften, thoughts begin to drift without urgency. In these moments, I often feel the air filling my lungs in a way that feels almost like a whisper, light and unhurried. I like paying attention to the way the chest rises gently, not because I command it to, but because the body knows this rhythm well. When psychologists study slow breathing, especially at night, they often speak of something called respiratory sinus arrhythmia, a natural ebb and flow in heart rate that aligns with breathing. When I inhale, my heart rate gently rises. When I exhale, it lowers. This soft pattern helps the mind relax, guiding thoughts into calmer waters without effort. I find comfort in knowing that this rhythm happens whether I focus on it or not. It is a steady companion, present in every moment, even when I'm unaware. But at night, when I choose to bring awareness to it, the effect seems to deepen. It becomes a kind of lullaby that the body sings to itself, quiet, steady, and reassuring. As I breathe in this slow and peaceful way, I often notice something else. The more attention I give to the exhale, the more the nervous system softens. Psychology has long observed that a slightly longer exhalation can trigger a deeper parasympathetic response. It signals relaxation more strongly than the inhale does. When I let my exhale stretch gently, it feels like the air carries away the remnants of tension, leaving behind only the soothing weight of calm. This isn't something I force. It's something that emerges naturally, like a leaf drifting downstream. This gentle shift in breathing has a way of quieting the mental chatter that often lingers at the edges of awareness. Thoughts still float by, but they lose their urgency. They seem softer, like distant echoes instead of sharp reminders. Psychologists describe this effect as attentional decoupling, a moment when internal concerns lose their grip because the mind focuses on something neutral and rhythmic. Breathing becomes a peaceful anchor, allowing thoughts to drift without pulling me along with them. As the breath settles further, I sometimes feel a warm heaviness in my body, especially in the shoulders and chest. It feels like the body finally recognizes that it does not need to carry the tensions of the day any longer. One of the gentle truths psychology often highlights is that physical relaxation can precede mental calm. Sometimes the body leads, and the mind follows. When muscles loosen, The brain interprets this as a sign that all is well, and it begins to ease its own pace. I often think about how natural this process is, how deeply ingrained it is in human physiology. Long before people talked about mindfulness or relaxation techniques, the body already knew how to find calm through breath. It's a built-in mechanism, something that evolved to help us retreat from stress and move toward rest when the world became quiet in these peaceful nighttime moments. I sometimes reflect on how breathing interacts with the senses. When air moves slowly in and out, everything else seems to quiet down. Sounds become softer, almost muted. Light feels distant. Even internal sensations begin to fade into a gentle background hum. This is something psychologists associate with sensory withdrawal, a calm narrowing of attention that helps the mind transition towards sleep. It isn't forced. It isn't abrupt. It simply unfolds as breathing deepens. I like how this soft withdrawal feels, as though the world is dimming itself gently, step by step, inviting the mind to settle deeper into ease. The breath becomes like a dim lantern in a quiet room, steady and warm, guiding awareness slowly towards stillness. Sometimes, during this slow breathing, I imagine the air moving through the body in the way researchers often describe it, as a quiet wave that helps regulate emotions. Studies on emotional regulation frequently highlight how slow breathing affects the amygdala, the part of the brain involved in processing feelings. When breathing becomes steady, the amygdala receives signals that it can rest. Emotional intensity fades. Thoughts lose their edges. Everything becomes softer, quieter, more manageable. This idea always feels comforting to me, because it reminds me that the breath is one of the simplest tools I have to soothe myself. I don't need elaborate techniques. I don't need complicated routines. I only need to breathe slowly and allow the body to guide the mind toward peaceful territory. In these moments, calm doesn't feel like something I'm trying to create. It feels like something that naturally rises, as the minutes pass. I often notice that my breathing becomes not just slower, but also lighter, almost like a gentle breeze passing through tall grass. This lightness is something psychologists describe when discussing the body's preparation for sleep. As the mind relaxes, breathing transitions from deep, voluntary breaths into automatic, shallow breaths that signal the body's readiness to drift. I like how delicate this feels. It's a reminder that rest is not an abrupt switch, but a gradual descent, a quiet sinking into softness. During this quiet descent, thoughts sometimes blend with sensations in a way that feels dreamlike. I might feel the warmth of my breath mixing with images from the day, or a faint memory might rise like a soft ripple in a still pond. This blending is part of the mind's natural transition into the early stages of sleep, when logic begins to relax and imagination moves a bit closer to the surface. Psychology calls this the hypnagogic drift, a gentle slipping between wakefulness and dreaming. Even though this state is temporary, I often find it deeply soothing. It feels like a soft threshold, a place where the mind lets go of structure and begins to float. Breathing supports this transition, acting as a quiet anchor that keeps everything steady, while awareness gently loosens its grip on the waking world as I breathe through this calm. I sometimes think about how widespread the benefits of slow breathing are. Studies have shown again and again that it can lower stress hormones, slow heart rate, ease the mind, and even help with emotional resilience. But what I find most comforting is how simple it all is. Slow, steady breathing, something the body knows how to do instinctively, can create such profound calm. It feels like one of the purest forms of self-kindness, and the most soothing part of all is that I don't have to get it perfect. There is no ideal rhythm I must follow, no precise count I must meet. The body naturally adjusts when given space. All I do is pay gentle attention, letting the breath guide me deeper into stillness. I begin to feel my eyelids grow heavier again, as though they too are responding to the softness of the breath. The body seems to understand the invitation to rest even before the mind does. This awareness makes the night feel even calmer, even quieter. The breath moves, the body softens, the mind drifts. Everything begins to align in a peaceful flow. In moments like these, I feel connected to a deep, ancient truth. Humans have always used breath to soothe themselves. From quiet moments in nature to stillness before sleep, breathing has been the gentle thread guiding us toward rest. The science behind it only deepens this understanding, offering names and explanations for something that feels beautifully intuitive tonight. As I let my breath become slower and softer, I feel myself easing even more deeply into calm. The edges of the day fade. The mind loosens. Peace rises gently, like a tide returning to shore. When night begins to settle into its gentlest shape, I often feel drawn toward the idea of safety knot, the dramatic kind that leaps into awareness during stressful moments. But the quiet, tender sense of safety that the mind creates when the world grows soft, there is something deeply soothing about this feeling. And as I sit here in the hush of the evening, I notice how my environment shapes the way my thoughts move. A soft room, a steady breath, a dim glow of these small elements gather to create a space where the mind feels held. And in psychology, there is a simple, calming truth. The brain relaxes automatically when it believes it is in a safe place. As I sink into the stillness around me, I notice how each part of the room seems to settle into its own quiet rhythm. The air grows a little cooler. The light becomes more gentle. Even silence seems to stretch out softly, like a blanket laid across the night. I let myself lean into this atmosphere because I know how strongly it influences the nervous system. For years, psychologists have studied the way the brain responds to safe environments, and the findings always circle back to the same comforting idea. Safety allows the mind to slow down. It opens the door for rest. It encourages calm without any force or effort. This sense of safety doesn't need grand gestures. It often emerges from the smallest details, a familiar scent in the air, the soft weight of blankets, the gentle sound of quietness filling the space. These subtle cues speak directly to an ancient part of the brain, one that evolved long before modern life complicated the world. The mind is always scanning for signs of security, and when it finds enough of them, it shifts into a restful state almost automatically. Heartbeats soften, breathing slows, thoughts lose their urgency. It feels as though the body understands something the mind hasn't yet put into words. As I sit here now, wrapped in this atmosphere of calm, I'm reminded of how powerful this sense of safety truly is. Psychologists sometimes refer to it as a psychological sanctuary, a place real or imagined where the mind can relax its defenses. These sanctuaries don't require walls or doors. They exist wherever the mind feels protected. For some, it might be a childhood memory. For others, it might be a quiet forest, a gentle breeze, or the calm hum of nighttime silence. For me, it's moments like this, where the room is dim and still, and nothing asks anything of me. When the brain senses this sanctuary, it reduces activity in the amygdala, the region responsible for detecting danger. The shift is subtle, gentle, and deeply soothing. I can feel it now, a soft loosening in the chest, a warmth spreading through my body as if to remind me that I'm allowed to rest. The mind no longer searches for threats. It no longer worries about what happened earlier or what might come later. Instead, it settles into the present moment, like a tired traveler finally finding a quiet place to sit. In these moments, I realize how much safety affects the quality of thoughts. Even memories feel different in a safe space. They rise more gently, like leaves drifting upward on a soft current rather than falling heavily. Psychology often describes this as positive retrieval bias, a gentle shift in the kinds of memories the mind accesses when it feels secure. The brain begins to draw from calmer, warmer recollections rather than anxious or stressful ones. It becomes easier to reflect, easier to imagine, easier to rest. I like noticing this shift. It feels like watching the tide move slowly toward the shore. Thoughts that might have felt sharp earlier in the day now arrive with rounded edges. Worries that once felt heavy begin to soften. The mind seems to glow with a faint warmth, as though some inner light has dimmed the harshness and replaced it with tranquility. Sometimes, as I sit in this quiet space, I imagine the concept of safety not just as a feeling, but as a physical shape, something soft, protective, and gently illuminated. Psychology often talks about holding environments, places, or moments that support emotional rest. The term might come from more complex theories, but its essence is beautifully simple. When we feel held by our surroundings, by our routines, by our own breath, the mind settles. I can feel that holding environment around me now, like the soft walls of a cocoon gently keeping the world at a distance. As the minutes drift by, I begin to sense how safety also influences imagination. When the mind relaxes, creativity becomes softer and more fluid. Thoughts drift into gentle imagery, quiet forests, distant starlight, warm blankets. Psychologists note that in safe environments, the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain involved in thoughtful, reflective thinking, becomes more active. This doesn't mean the mind becomes busy. It simply means it becomes spacious. There is room for gentle wandering. There is room for soft imaginings. There is room for rest in this calm. I sometimes picture myself walking through a quiet place, maybe a soft garden under a moonlit sky, or a peaceful hillside where the grass sways slowly in the wind. These images aren't dramatic or vivid. They are gentle, blurred at the edges, like watercolor paintings. They don't demand attention. They simply drift, providing a sense of peaceful openness. And I know this imagination is supported by the sense of safety in the room, by the quietness of the moment, by the slow rhythm of my breath. Everything is working together to create a mental landscape where rest can unfold naturally. As I continue to sit in this gentle darkness, I notice another subtle shift. My muscles begin to grow heavier. Shoulders loosen. Jaw softens. Fingers rest without tension. This physical release is another sign that the mind feels safe. When the brain no longer expects danger, it allows the body to let go of its own quiet vigilance. Psychology often explains this through the reduction of cortisol, the stress hormone. When cortisol levels drop, muscles release their grip, breathing becomes smoother, and the body invites sleep with greater willingness. This heaviness is not uncomfortable. It is soothing, like sinking into soft sand or warm water. I let myself feel it fully, knowing it is a natural response to the calm I've created. In this comforting weight, there is a sense of grounding, as though the world has paused just long enough for me to rest deeply. I don't have to hold myself upright against the rush of the day. I can simply let gravity cradle me. The more I lean into this heaviness, the more I recognize how deeply the mind values safety. From the earliest moments of life, humans seek comfort, warmth, gentle voices, familiar surroundings. These early experiences shape the nervous system, teaching it how to recognize calm. Even as adults, we respond to these same cues. A soft voice, a dim room, a steady breath, they all signal to the brain that it can rest. In moments like this, I sometimes marvel at how universal this need for safety is. Across cultures, across time, across every generation, people have created soothing rituals at night. They dim lamps, soften voices, seek quietness, and wrap themselves in warm layers. These rituals form a predictable rhythm that signals safety. Through psychology, we understand that these small actions aren't just habits, they are biological cues. They tell the brain that it can lower its guard, drift into reflection, and prepare for sleep. As I sit in the gentle quiet, I find myself thinking about how safety also influences the passage of time. When the mind is calm, time seems to move more slowly. Moments stretch out like long, soft waves. There is no rush, no urgency. Psychologists often refer to this as temporal slowing, a perceptual shift that occurs when the nervous system relaxes. It makes the night feel more spacious, as though there is enough time to breathe, enough time to settle, enough time to sink into rest. In this slowed sense of time, the mind becomes more patient. Thoughts arrive softly, linger gently, and drift away without clinging. Even emotions seem to ease into the background, becoming warm murmurs instead of sharp sensations. This emotional softening is something the brain does naturally when safe. It reduces the intensity of internal experience, making it easier to drift towards sleep. The more I reflect on this quiet comfort, the more I appreciate the gentle intelligence of the mind. Safety is not simply a feeling. It is a biological state that the brain has spent millennia learning to cultivate. When it senses that the world is soft, quiet, and calm, it guides every part of the body toward rest, as if following an ancient script. Tonight, as I sit in this safe space, I feel a deep sense of gratitude for this natural rhythm. It requires no effort, no perfection, only awareness and a willingness to let calm rise. The quiet around me becomes a soft cocoon, the breath a gentle anchor, the mind a slow river flowing toward sleep. I let myself drift deeper into this comfort, knowing that the body and mind are working together in the most natural way, guiding me gently toward rest. When the night settles deeply and the world quiets into a soft hush, I often feel a tender shift inside my mind. Thoughts begin to move in a slower rhythm, unfolding not as sharp lines or hurried fragments, but as gentle blooms, soft shapes, rising and opening with quiet patience. There is something peaceful about this transformation, something that feels almost like watching a field of flowers open at dawn, each one drifting into the light at its own steady pace. In psychology, there is a gentle truth behind this slow blooming. When the mind is calm, thoughts naturally soften. They lose their urgency. They lose their noise. They lose their weight. They become quiet companions instead of restless currents. As I settle into the dim stillness of the evening, I notice how the mind becomes more reflective, more spacious. It doesn't try to rush toward answers or cling to unfinished pieces of the day. Instead, it drifts. This drifting is something psychologists observe in relaxed states, when the brain shifts away from intense problem solving and into soft, wandering thought. This mode, often connected to the default network in the brain, is like a gentle lake still at the surface, yet filled with slow, drifting currents beneath. Thought doesn't force itself into words. It simply moves like water. In these quiet moments, I can feel that slow movement. Thoughts rise without insistence, as though each one knows it does not have to compete. The mind isn't trying to fix, or plan, or protect. It is simply observing, allowing gentle ideas to form and dissolve with ease. This soft, meandering movement feels deeply comforting, and psychology often ties it to a reduction in cognitive load. When the brain is freed from the demands of the day, it has room to breathe. And when it has room to breathe, thoughts take on a gentler shape. As I lean deeper into this calm, I start to notice how simple ideas drift into awareness, pleasant memories, peaceful images, soft reminders that there is nothing I must do in this moment. These tender thoughts seem to arrive like small lanterns glowing in the dark. They aren't bright enough to startle, nor dim enough to fade. They sit gently in the mind, offering quiet warmth. Psychologists sometimes refer to this as positive, spontaneous cognition. The way the mind gravitates toward gentle imagery when it feels safe and relaxed. I enjoy observing this process. It's like watching fireflies move lazily through a quiet field. Each gentle thought flickers and floats, never demanding attention, never overwhelming the senses. This slow bloom invites a kind of mental spaciousness, a soft openness where calm feels natural and unforced. And in this softness, I begin to understand why the mind protects peaceful moments so carefully. Calm is not the absence of thought, it is the gentle shaping of thought as the night deepens around me. I begin to feel a warmth spreading across my mind, almost like a soft glow behind my eyes. This warmth often appears when the brain shifts into alpha and theta wave patterns, rhythms associated with relaxation, creativity, and early stages of sleep. These frequencies make thoughts feel fluid and slow, helping the mind move away from concrete logic and into softer imagination. I can sense this transition in the way ideas begin to merge, overlap, and drift without boundaries. Thoughts lose their sharp edges and blend like watercolors. This watercolor quality of the mind always feels soothing. Psychology often connects this state to light daydreaming, where the brain is active but unhurried. In this gentle state, thoughts can drift into pleasant scenes without effort, soft landscapes, warm memories, quiet places the mind likes to visit when the world feels calm. These scenes aren't vivid or detailed. They are more like faint impressions, like looking through a frosted window at something beautiful and distant. Sometimes, I imagine quiet hills covered in soft mist. Other times, I see a calm river reflecting the dim evening light. These images don't stay long. They come and go, blooming and dissolving without trying to hold my attention. And every time they drift in, they bring a sense of peace, a soft reassurance that the mind knows how to soothe itself. As I continue to settle into this slow bloom of thought, I notice how my body relaxes in response. The shoulders loosen a little more. The breath drops into a slower rhythm. Even the muscles in the face begin to soften. This gentle physical shift is something psychologists often describe as somatic quieting, the body's natural response to soothing mental states. When the mind feels comforted, the body follows. In these moments of somatic quiet, thoughts feel even softer. They move not like tasks to be completed, but like clouds drifting through a quiet sky. This cloud-like drifting is something researchers frequently observe in the transition between wakefulness and sleep, where the boundaries between memory, imagination, and sensation become less rigid. Instead of thinking in words, the mind begins to think in impressions, feelings, and soft imagery. The mind isn't trying to understand. It is simply being. This state feels gentle and deeply restful. It gives me the sense that the mind is taking a slow, peaceful walk through its own quiet garden. Psychology often describes this as mental relaxation state, where the brain is active enough to wander but calm enough to avoid stress. Thoughts bloom slowly, one after another, without urgency. Sometimes I think of these gentle thoughts as petals unfolding. Each one opens gradually, revealing a tender, simple idea. Perhaps a memory of a moment when I felt peaceful. Perhaps an image of a quiet morning. Or maybe just the sensation of warmth, comfort, and ease. These thoughts don't need structure. They don't need stories. They simply need space to bloom. The more I let myself lean into this blooming, the more I notice how safe the mind feels in these moments. Safety allows the brain to explore gently, without the sharp vigilance of the day. When the amygdala quiets and the nervous system relaxes, the mind feels free to wander without fear. In this peaceful wandering, thoughts take on a softness that cannot exist when stress is present. It is similar to how flowers open only when the conditions are right: soft light, gentle air, calm surroundings. Tonight, the conditions feel just right. The room is dim. The world is quiet, and the mind feels held in a soft atmosphere of comfort. In this space, thoughts begin to bloom slowly, one after another, without any need for direction. They move like quiet visitors, stepping gently into awareness before drifting away. As I observe them, I begin to appreciate how thoughts can be calming, not disruptive. When the mind is at peace, thinking becomes gentler, soft exploration rather than a restless urgency. This change is something psychologists often connect to parasympathetic activation, when the rest and digest system guides the body and mind into tranquility. In this state, the mind no longer searches for problems to solve. It simply drifts, and in this drifting, creativity blooms, not the lively creativity of inspiration, but the soft creativity of dreams. Ideas blend, images form, memories soften, and feelings settle like dust in a warm beam of moonlight. The mind becomes a quiet canvas, where gentle thoughts paint themselves slowly, stroke by stroke. Without pressure, sometimes I sense a faint glow forming around these thoughts, as though peaceful ideas carry their own soft light. Psychology often notes that positive mental imagery can trigger calming neurochemicals that help the body prepare for sleep. These gentle chemicals like serotonin and oxytocin create warmth in the mind, a kind of emotional exhale that reassures me that everything is all right. Tonight, I can feel that emotional exhale. It's subtle but unmistakably soft, settling in the chest, a gentle warmth along the spine, a deep quieting in the mind. Thoughts continue to bloom, but now they bloom even more slowly, almost dreamily. They feel like the earliest traces of sleep, shaping themselves out of imagination. This dreamy quality grows deeper as moments pass. Psychology describes this as the early hypnagogic phase, the soft borderland where thoughts begin to dissolve, merging with the shapes of dreams. In this phase, gentle thoughts often feel more vivid at first, then gradually blur as sleep approaches. But there is no rush. The bloom unfolds at its own pace, As I drift into this hazy state, I feel the mind releasing the day. The heavy parts fall away. The sharp parts soften. The lingering questions lose their grip. In their place, soft, warm thoughts continue blooming, each one fading gently into the next. The night holds me quietly. The mind holds me gently. The thoughts hold me softly. And everything feels ready for rest. When the world pulls its softest blanket across the sky, I often feel myself entering a space where everything speaks in a different tone. The night has a language of its own, one made not of words or sentences, but of gentle sensations, quiet rhythms, and subtle cues that guide the mind into calm. As I settle deeper into this tranquil darkness, I become aware of how the night communicates with me in ways that daylight never does. It doesn't rush. It doesn't demand. It simply whispers in a soft, steady voice that the mind instinctively understands. And psychology often reminds us that the brain responds deeply to environmental cues, especially those that signal rest, quiet, and safety. As I sit in this gentle dimness, I notice how the absence of bright light allows my thoughts to expand with a slow, almost dreamlike patience. Darkness softens everything. Edges disappear. Colors fade into muted shadows. And in this softened world, the mind feels less alert, less guarded, less inclined to chase after ideas. This shift is biological. When light fades, the brain begins releasing melatonin, a quiet messenger that gently tells the body it is time to slow down. Melatonin doesn't force sleep, simply sets the stage, dimming the internal lights so that calm can rise like a soft tide dot in this dim glow. I often feel as though the edges of my awareness widen. The mind feels bigger, quieter, more spacious. Thoughts drift like long echoes instead of short sparks. The night invites this softness. It asks the mind to let go of structure, to wander without urgency. Psychologists sometimes call this permissive attention, a kind of mental openness that emerges when stimuli are low and the world grows quiet. In this state, the mind becomes more reflective, more gentle, more willing to release the day. I take a slow breath, and in that breath, I hear the night speaking again, not in sound, but in feeling. The stillness tells my body that nothing is needed of me in this moment. There is no task waiting, no decision pressing, no conversation lingering. This absence of demand communicates safety in the most ancient way. Long ago, humans learned to read nighttime cues: cool air, soft darkness, quiet surroundings as signals that it was time to rest. Even now, the brain responds with the same instinct. Heart rate lowers, muscles loosen, thoughts stretch into slower shapes. As I relax into this gentle descent, I begin to feel the language of the night moving through me in subtle patterns. The quiet hum of the room, the faint rustle of fabric when I shift, the soft rhythm of my own breathing. Each sound is delicate, small, non-intrusive. Psychology teaches that low-intensity, predictable sounds can soothe the nervous system by reducing sensory overload. This is why gentle noises, like soft wind, distant rainfall, or a quiet voice often feel comforting. They create a stable soundscape that reassures the mind. Tonight, even the silence seems to have a texture, a soft weight that wraps around my thoughts. Silence isn't empty. It's full of signals. The absence of noise tells the brain it can lower its guard, letting the parasympathetic system guide the body into deeper calm. In this soothing quiet, my awareness becomes more inward, more focused on the slow bloom of my inner world. Sometimes, as I listen to the night, I notice how my thoughts begin to shift from language into imagery. Instead of sentences, I see gentle, scene-spent landscapes, quiet pathways, small moments of tranquility. Psychology describes this as the mind moving toward imagistic thinking, a calm and instinctive form of mental activity that precedes sleep. In this mode, the brain no longer prioritizes logic or structure. It simply drifts. I allow these soft images to form without questioning them. A dim cabin glowing in the distance. A tranquil field touched by pale moonlight. The gentle curve of a quiet shoreline. These images aren't vivid. They are hazy, blurred, as if seen through the softest mist. And every one of them carries a quiet warmth. The night is painting its language into my awareness, using the mind's natural tendencies to soothe itself as the minutes pass. I begin to feel the mind deepen into this dreamy softness. The thoughts that arise now feel lighter, as though they are made from feathers instead of weight. They drift in, offer a gentle moment, and drift out again. This is one of the night's most beautiful messages. Nothing needs to stay. The mind is allowed to release. It is allowed to wander freely. Psychologists often talk about cognitive offloading during nighttime relaxation, when the brain stops holding on to the day's information and begins to let loose threads fall away. I can feel that happening now. The day loosens. The mental knots unwind. Thoughts lose their sharpness and become soft pools of awareness. In this delicate state, I realize how the night encourages not just quietness, but slowness. Slowness of thought, slowness of breath, slowness of internal movement. There is a profound comfort in slow mental rhythms. Psychology has long recognized that a slower pace reduces mental load, lowers stress responses, and prepares the mind for rest. It's as if the night carries a natural invitation to slow down, and the mind knows how to accept it without effort. As I breathe through this softness, I begin to sense how the night's language also influences emotion. Feelings that might have been sharper earlier in the day now feel muted and gentle. Emotions drift in softened waves, not rising high enough to disturb the calm. This emotional quiet is supported by the brain's nighttime chemistry: lower cortisol, higher melatonin, deeper parasympathetic activation. The body shifts into a state where emotional processing becomes tender, not intense. In this emotional softness, memories begin to take on a different quality. They feel warmer, quieter. Psychology often notes that nighttime reflection tends to emphasize gentler memories when the mind is calm, creating a soothing cycle. Soft memories create soft emotions, and soft emotions create softer thoughts. I feel that cycle unfolding now. The night is encouraging me to remember only what comforts me, only what soothes me, only what eases the heart. As I sink deeper into this state, I notice how the boundary between my thoughts and the night itself begins to blur. The quiet around me feels like an extension of the quiet inside me. The dimness of the room feels like the dimness gathering gently in my mind. This merging is a hallmark of early hypnagogic states, when consciousness transitions into the first stages of sleep. Psychology describes this boundary as fluid and porous, a place where outside cues blend with internal sensations. Tonight, the night's cues feel especially tender. The cool air brushing gently against my skin, the weight of stillness in the room, the soft darkness holding everything in a quiet embrace. These sensations form their own gentle language, guiding me deeper into calm with every moment that passes. As I listen to this wordless language, I begin to feel a profound sense of surrender, the dramatic kind. But the gentle surrender of letting go, the soft release of allowing myself to rest without resistance. The night encourages this surrender simply by existing. Its soft cues speak to the most instinctive part of my being, reminding me that rest is natural, that stillness is safe, that quiet is healing. And as the mind drifts even deeper, thoughts begin to blend with dreams. This blending is delicate, almost imperceptible. One moment, I am thinking softly. The next, I am drifting through gentle images that feel more like dreams than thoughts. Psychology calls this transition hypnagogic imagery, a peaceful melding of imagination and sleep. I allow this imagery to rise without trying to hold it. The soft glow of a distant lantern, the calm movement of clouds across a moonlit sky, the faint shimmer of water in quiet darkness. These images feel like the night speaking in its purest form, silent, soft, and steady, as everything inside me slows to the gentlest rhythm. I realize that the night's language is not meant to be interpreted. It is meant to be felt. It is a quiet lullaby in the form of darkness, breath, warmth, and stillness. A message from the world to the mind. You may rest now, and as I sink into this message fully, I let the night hold me gently, guiding me toward deeper calm, deeper quiet, and deeper peace. Sometimes, when the night is deep and the world grows still, I feel as though I'm walking along gentle pathways hidden beneath my waking thoughts. These pathways are soft, winding, and delicate shaped, not by logic, but by the subtle movements of the mind as it relaxes into its most peaceful state. As I breathe slowly, I can sense these inner pathways opening, revealing the quiet movements that guide the brain during its slow transition toward rest. Psychology often calls these movements subconscious processes, the gentle workings that happen beneath awareness, yet guide so much of what we feel in the calm of the night. These hidden processes feel especially soothing. They drift just below the surface, shaping the rhythm of my breath, the softness of my thoughts, and the peaceful heaviness settling into my body. When I let myself sink into that awareness, everything feels unhurried. Nothing pushes, nothing pulls. The mind seems to float gently, carried by currents that have always existed within me. As I continue breathing softly, I become aware of how the subconscious speaks in sensations rather than words. A warmth spreading through the chest, a loosening in the shoulders, a slow fade of tension behind the eyes. These sensations are the mind's way of telling the body that it is safe. Psychology describes this as the activation of the parasympathetic system, the quiet branch of the nervous system that encourages rest, recovery, and gentle calm. I can feel it moving through me now, like a soft tide rolling in at the edge of a moonlit shore. The subconscious works quietly, almost invisibly, yet its influence is profound. It guides memories, shapes emotions, and organizes thoughts without any need for conscious effort. At night, when the world is silent and the mind is free from demands, this invisible system becomes even more active. It gathers the scattered pieces of the day, arranging them into soft clusters of understanding. It smooths sharp emotions into gentle curves. It files away the thoughts that no longer need attention. As I sit with this awareness, I'm struck by how the subconscious doesn't need direction. It works best when left alone, allowed to drift through its own natural rhythm. This is why calm environments, soft light, quiet spaces, slow breathing can support such deep relaxation. They allow the subconscious to guide the mind instead of the other way around. In this softness, I can feel my inner world becoming more balanced, more peaceful, more aligned with the slow rhythm of the night. Sometimes, when the mind is quiet enough, I can sense memories rising gently, not with urgency, but with warmth. The subconscious tends to bring forward memories that are emotionally resonant, especially those linked to comfort or familiarity. These memories don't appear as vivid scenes, but as gentle impressions, a smell, a sensation, a faint image that drifts like a soft whisper. Psychology recognizes this as spontaneous memory activation, a calm and natural process that occurs when the mind is relaxed and unoccupied. As these impressions rise, I allow them to drift through me without holding on to them. A quiet morning from long ago, the comforting sound of pages turning in a peaceful room, the steady rhythm of footsteps on a soft path. These moments feel serene, softened by time, carried gently by the subconscious. They remind me that the mind stores countless quiet comforts, waiting to surface when the world slows down. The subconscious doesn't only hold memories, it also carries emotions that may not have been fully processed during the day. But in the calm of the night, these emotions soften. Instead of sharp edges, they appear as gentle currents, drifting through awareness with a subdued glow. Psychology calls this emotional integration, a process through which the mind gently dissolves tension and restores balance by revisiting feelings in a calmer state. As I breathe slowly, I sense these currents moving within me, soft waves that soothe rather than disturb. They help me understand that emotions, when allowed to flow gently, have a natural rhythm of their own. They rise, they move, they fade, and the night provides the perfect stillness for this rhythm to happen naturally, without resistance. In this quiet state, the subconscious often begins creating gentle mental images. These images are not dreams, but soft precursors to dreams, shifting shapes, muted colors, faint scenes that appear briefly and dissolve. Psychology refers to this as hypnagogic activity, the earliest stage of sleep's imagery. These soft visuals are a sign that the mind is transitioning from conscious control to subconscious flow. Sometimes I see a faint pathway winding through a foggy field. Sometimes a shimmering ripple on dark water. Sometimes a soft light glowing behind a distant hill. These images have no story, no sequence. They are simply gentle impressions that guide the mind deeper into calm. They feel like the subconscious is painting soft landscapes for me to drift through as I move toward sleep. As these images drift in and out, my thoughts become slower, more fluid. The subconscious begins shaping ideas into soft, abstract forms. Instead of thinking in sentences, I start thinking in sensations, warmth, clarity, softness, heaviness. This shift mirrors the brain's transition into slower wave patterns, particularly alpha waves, which are associated with relaxation and early sleep. I can feel my mind syncing with this rhythm, becoming lighter and softer with every passing moment. The subconscious also plays a quiet role in regulating the body during this transition. It slows the heart. It deepens the breath. It relaxes the muscles. Each of these changes happens naturally, without conscious decision. They are orchestrated by patterns the mind has learned over a lifetime, patterns that signal the body that rest is near. Psychology describes this coordinated shift as the beginning of the sleep onset process, guided by both neural and hormonal cues. As I listen to my breath, I sense how beautifully the subconscious coordinates this shift. Nothing is forced. Everything flows. The mind settles. The body softens. The boundaries between inner and outer worlds blur gently. In this softened state, Thoughts no longer feel like deliberate actions, they feel like drifting clouds, moving without any effort from me. The subconscious also begins reducing external awareness during this time. Sounds grow softer, sensations feel distant. The world around me becomes muted. This gradual withdrawal is the mind's natural way of preparing for the dream state. It simplifies the sensory load, allowing the brain to focus inward rather than outward. Psychology calls this sensory gating, a quiet filtering process that protects the mind from unnecessary stimulation during rest. As I drift deeper into this quietness, I notice how the subconscious often creates a sense of time slowing. Moments stretch, sensations lengthen, thoughts linger a little longer before dissolving. This perception is common during nighttime relaxation, as the brain shifts into patterns that focus more on internal experiences than external timings. Time becomes soft, flexible, almost irrelevant, and within this softened sense of time, I feel a profound sense of ease. The subconscious is not trying to solve anything or create anything. It is simply guiding the mind through its natural rhythms, carrying me gently toward the edge of dreams. There is no urgency here, no pressure, no expectation, just quiet movement. As the moments drift, I begin to feel as though I am floating, carried by a slow and peaceful current. This floating sensation appears often during deep relaxation, as the mind's perception of the body shifts. It's a sign that the subconscious has taken a more active role, guiding the body towards stillness, while the mind drifts inward in this floating state. The inner pathways feel wide open and quiet. Thoughts pass like soft shadows. Emotions drift like gentle waves. Memories appear like faint glimmers. Everything is subtle, delicate, peaceful, and the subconscious continues to guide each movement, shaping the night's calm with the softest touch. As the sensation deepens, I feel the night holding me in its gentle embrace. The subconscious continues its quiet work processing, organizing, soothing, guiding while I simply drift. There is a sweetness in this surrender, a quiet trust in the mind's natural ability to bring itself to peace. And in this tranquil drift, I let go of the last traces of the day, allowing the subconscious to carry me deeper into the soft, soothing quiet of the night. When the night deepens and the soft boundary between waking and dreaming begins to blur, I can feel the mind shifting into a quiet and delicate rhythm. It is a rhythm shaped not by conscious intention, but by the subtle movements that guide the brain as it prepares to weave its nightly tapestry of dreams. This weaving begins long before sleep fully arrives. It starts in the gentle moments when thoughts loosen, sensations soften, and the mind opens slowly to the drifting shapes that rise from deeper layers of awareness. Psychology often describes this shift as the beginning of internal integration, the stage where the mind gathers the threads of the day and begins spinning them into new patterns. As I ease into this dim and tranquil space, I notice the small, almost imperceptible ways the mind begins preparing for dreams. Ideas lose their sharp edges. Memories soften into impressions. Thoughts become lighter, floating freely without anchoring themselves to any specific purpose. This softening is the first sign that dream weaving has quietly begun. The mind is not yet dreaming, but it is collecting the colors and textures that the subconscious will soon shape into gentle inner landscapes in this calm, pre-dream state. The mind begins reorganizing the experiences of the day. Psychologists often refer to this as memory consolidation, a central process the brain performs each night. But even though the term sounds clinical, the experience feels far more tender. Memories do not appear like crisp photographs. They drift like faint shadows, warm and muted, arriving not as complete scenes, but as soft emotional impressions. A small fragment of conversation, a lingering sense of joy, a gentle moment I didn't realize meant so much at the time. These impressions rise like quiet ripples, appearing without logic, without sequence. As these soft memories drift into awareness, the mind begins blending them with imagination. This blending is delicate and subtle, and it marks the earliest stage of dream formation. The images are not yet full dreams, but they carry the first hints of dreamlike quality, shifting textures, softened colors, floating sensations. Psychology calls these early impressions hypnagogic imagery, and they signal the moment when consciousness starts drifting toward the deeper waters of sleep. I allow these gentle patterns to form without trying to understand them. A quiet hallway filled with warm light, a distant tree swaying in a soft breeze, a feeling of being near water, though no water is visible. These impressions have no clear origin. They simply emerge from the subconscious as the mind begins preparing to weave its nightly patterns. Each image is a thread, subtle and quiet, waiting to be woven into something deeper. As I drift deeper into this calm, the weaving becomes more intricate. The subconscious begins drawing not only from memory, but from emotion, sensation, and imagination. The mind moves in wide, fluid arcs now, drifting from one soft impression to another. Thoughts no longer follow linear paths. Instead, they fold gently into one another, forming a mosaic of subtle feelings and images. Psychology often describes this state as a loosening of cognitive boundaries, a natural shift that makes dream formation possible. In this softened state, the emotional landscape plays an important role. Dreams often arise from emotions that linger beneath the surface, feelings that were not fully processed during the day. But at night, these emotions lose their intensity. They become soft, muted waves that gently guide the mind toward themes that need attention. Not in a dramatic way, but in a quiet, symbolic one. A small worry might appear as a slow-moving river. A moment of joy might take shape as a warm, golden light. This symbolic weaving allows the mind to process emotions gently, without overwhelm. As the dream patterns grow more intricate, the mind also begins to incorporate fragments of imagination that have no connection to memory or emotion. These fragments often appear as abstract shapes, soft colors, or floating sensations. Psychology calls this spontaneous neural activation, a natural firing of brain networks that provides raw material for dreams. But in the experience of drifting into sleep, these activations feel like gentle brushstrokes painting the first layers of a dream's landscape. I feel myself sinking deeper into this quiet internal world. Thoughts drift more slowly now, stretched into long, soft waves. The sense of my physical body begins to fade, replaced by a quiet, floating sensation. This dissociation is a normal part of the transition into sleep, shaped by shifts in brain activity and a reduction in sensory input. The subconscious takes a more central role, allowing the imagination to unfold without interference from the waking mind. The weaving continues quietly. Threads of sound, emotion, memory, and imagination intertwine. A soft echo of a familiar voice, the faint color of an old photograph, the gentle sensation of walking along a path that doesn't exist in waking life. These elements drift together in a peaceful, rhythmic dance. Nothing is forced. Nothing is organized. Everything floats into place with natural ease as the dream patterns become richer. The mind begins to release the last traces of waking awareness. The edges of consciousness soften. The internal world grows more vivid, even as the reasoning of the waking mind grows quieter. This is the final stage before true dreaming begins. Psychologists often refer to this as the transition into non-REM sleep, the stage where dreams become structured, even if they remain gentle and subtle in this state. The mind begins weaving not only impressions, but small fragments of narrative, not full stories, but the beginnings of gentle movement. I might sense myself walking slowly, though I am lying completely still. I might feel a quiet presence nearby, though no one is there. These sensations are peaceful, soft, barely formed. They are the early threads of dream motion, the mind's way of preparing to step fully into the dream world. As the mind drifts deeper, the weaving becomes even more fluid. Time loses meaning. The past and present blend effortlessly. Places shift without explanation. This fluidity is one of the most soothing aspects of dream formation. It allows the mind to move freely without the constraints of waking logic. In this freedom, the subconscious explores connections that would seem impossible during the day. It plays with meaning. It experiments with emotion. It softens the rigid lines of thought, and throughout this gentle weaving, the brain performs one of its most important tasks: emotional restoration. Dreams help the mind process feelings in a safe and symbolic way. They create space for understanding without intensity, for integration without overwhelm. And even though the dreams themselves may be forgotten by morning, the emotional processing remains, leaving the mind quieter and more balanced. As I continue drifting, I notice the soft hum of internal rhythms. The breath moves in slow, peaceful waves. The heart beats gently. The muscles grow heavy and relaxed. These rhythms support the weaving, providing a stable foundation for the dream patterns to form. When the body is calm, the mind is free to explore without interference. In this deep calm, the subconscious begins to shape the final threads that will guide the first full dream. These threads are made of the most subtle impressions, feelings of comfort, sensations of floating, faint colors that shift like light underwater. They become the background of the dream, the quiet canvas upon which deeper patterns will eventually unfold. The weaving is almost complete now. The mind drifts effortlessly, held in a soft cradle of inner motion. Conscious thought has nearly dissolved, replaced by quiet imagery and gentle emotion. The night wraps around this inner world like a soft blanket, holding the subconscious as it prepares to open the doorway to dreaming. And in this delicate space, I feel the beauty of the mind's nightly rituals, the calm collecting of impressions, the soft blending of memory and imagination, the gentle shaping of emotion into symbolic patterns. It is a quiet art form, performed every night without effort, without awareness, yet essential to the balance of the mind as the final threads settle into place. I allow myself to drift even deeper, letting the mind guide me toward the quiet landscapes it has prepared so tenderly. The dream world waits softly, ready to unfold in peaceful patterns shaped by everything the mind holds gently inside. When the night reaches its deepest stillness and the mind drifts in its softest rhythms, there comes a gentle moment when everything begins to shift again. It is not dramatic, nor sudden, nor bright. It happens with the quiet patience of dawn forming behind a distant horizon. This moment is the earliest hint of awakening, not the waking of the body, but the slow awakening of the mind inside the quiet world of sleep. Psychology often describes this subtle shift as the beginning of neural reorientation, a quiet preparation the brain undergoes long before the eyes open. But in the softness of night, it feels like something much simpler, much gentler, the mind turning slowly toward a faint light it cannot yet see. As I rest within this twilight of consciousness, I can sense the dream world beginning to loosen its hold. The soft imagery fades into mist. The drifting sensations become lighter, thinner, more distant. What once felt vivid now feels like a delicate echo. This fading is not an ending, but a transition. The brain begins shifting its rhythms, moving gradually from the deep waves of sleep toward patterns that allow awareness to rise again. These shifts are subtle and slow, and the mind experiences them not as changes, but as a gentle clearing. The dreams that held me so tenderly begin dissolving into quiet impressions, like ink dispersing into water. Psychology explains that most dreams disappear during the shift between sleep stages, leaving behind only emotional traces. But the experience feels more poetic than that. It feels as though the mind is carefully gathering its threads, tucking them away in a soft, hidden space so that awakening can happen with peaceful simplicity. The emotions soften, the images fade, the movements still, and I am left floating in a calm, weightless, quiet dot in this quietness. The subconscious begins withdrawing gently, allowing the conscious mind to stir like a small flame beginning to glow again. This reawakening is delicate. It does not feel like thinking. It feels like awareness breathing softly, expanding millimeter by millimeter. Instead of dreams, there are soft sensations, warmth, heaviness, the subtle weight of the blanket, the distant awareness of the room. These sensations return slowly because the brain is easing back into its role of interpreting the world around it. I can sense this shift happening in layers. The deepest layer is still wrapped in the softness of sleep, holding on to the last traces of rest. Above it lies a layer filled with gentle awareness, neither dreaming nor fully awake. This space is incredibly tender, a psychological in-between where the mind is open, calm, and unburdened. Many describe this state as the remnants of hypnopompic experience, the gentle imagery and emotions that drift through consciousness right before awakening. But inside it, the experience feels like floating on a soft horizon, where nothing is required of me. Within this horizon, the mind begins reconnecting its internal patterns. Thoughts form quietly, moving slowly like warm clouds drifting across a pale sky. These thoughts are not sharp or demanding. They do not push me toward action or responsibility. They simply appear as soft acknowledgments of returning awareness, a faint sense of self, a subtle memory of where I am, a gentle reminder of the body resting still and safe. As these soft thoughts gather, the emotional landscape remains peaceful. The calm created during sleep does not vanish immediately. It lingers like a warm glow. Psychology describes this lingering calm as the result of lowered cortisol levels and sustained parasympathetic activity, which remain active for a while after deep rest. But to me, it feels like the night is offering a quiet farewell, letting its comfort remain just long enough to soften the transition. In this soft return, the breath plays a steady, soothing role. I notice it more clearly now, not because it changed, but because my awareness has risen enough to feel its gentle rhythm. Each inhale feels like a tiny opening, each exhale like a soft settling. This natural rhythm guides the mind toward the threshold of waking, providing a slow and steady pulse that the body instinctively follows. Psychology often emphasizes the grounding effect of breath awareness, especially during transitions between states of consciousness. But here, it happens automatically, without intention. The mind simply follows the breath's slow invitation. Toward awareness, the body begins to stir only slightly. A faint warmth in the hands, a soft heaviness in the legs, a gentle awareness of the pillow beneath the head. None of these sensations demand movement. They simply reintroduce the physical presence that was so distant during sleep. The body remains still because the mind is still resting in the final stage of the night's softness. This stillness is a sign of deeper relaxation, a quiet pause the brain allows before fully re-engaging the muscles, senses, and alertness of waking life. As I drift in this in-between state, I begin noticing how the mind feels clearer. Not clear with sharpness, but clear with openness. Sleep removes the clutter that accumulates during the day, small worries, scattered thoughts, misplaced emotions. In the quiet after dreaming, the mind feels like a calm, open field washed gently by night's soft rain. Psychology often describes this mental clarity as cognitive restoration, the brain's way of returning to balance after processing and organizing the day's experiences through dreams and rest. This restored clarity feels peaceful, almost luminous. Ideas appear slowly, gently. Emotions rise softly, without edge or urgency. There is room for every sensation to exist without overwhelm. This spaciousness is one of the gifts of slow awakening. The mind remains in a calm, receptive state for a brief moment before the responsibilities of day begin. In this space, everything feels soft, manageable, and serene. As the awareness grows slightly brighter, I begin sensing the world around me in faint impressions. The dimness of the room, the coolness of the air, the distant quiet that still wraps everything in its gentle blanket. These sensations return gradually as sensory processing reactivates. Psychology notes that the brain reintroduces sensory awareness in steps, ensuring a smooth and non-jarring transition from sleep to wakefulness. And I can feel each step happening naturally, without effort or rush. There is something comforting about this slow reintroduction of the world. It feels like the night gently guiding me back, showing me the outlines of the room, the whisper of sound, the feeling of being present again. Nothing feels abrupt. Nothing feels bright or demanding. Instead, awakening feels like drifting upward through soft layers of warmth and quiet. Inside this rising awareness, an interesting calm remains. The mind feels unhurried. Even as waking thoughts begin to gather, they do not rush. They do not pile up. They approach slowly, as though respecting the lingering stillness of the night. Psychology often associates this state with enhanced prefrontal relaxation, meaning the parts of the brain responsible for planning and problem-solving remain quiet for a brief time after sleep. This allows a gentle mental transition instead of an abrupt return to daylight logic. As thoughts continue to form, I begin noticing the subtle emotional resonance left from the night's dreams. Even if the dreams are forgotten, their emotional texture lingers. A sense of peace, a faint comfort, a quiet reassurance. This emotional presence is the final gift of dreaming, a reminder that the inner world continues to touch the waking mind even after the images fade. Psychology explains that dreams influence waking mood, shaping the softness or brightness of the first moments of the day. And I can feel that influence, now gentle, tender, steady. In these early moments of awakening, time feels incredibly slow. The mind remains unhurried, the body remains heavy, and awareness expands at a calm, measured pace. This slowness is soothing. It gives space for the mind to settle gently into the world instead of jumping into activity. Many traditions of psychology and mindfulness often praise this quiet moment as one of the most restorative parts of rest, not just the sleep itself, but the awakening that follows with such softness as the mind rises further. I begin feeling gratitude for this gentle process, not in a forced or deliberate way, but in a soft, natural manner. The night carried me through quiet dreams, eased my thoughts, softened my emotions, and restored my inner world. And now, in the quiet of early awareness, I feel the peace left behind by all that quiet work. The horizon of waking is near, but I am not crossing it yet. Instead, I linger in the calm just before it, a place where dreams have faded but still leave warmth, a place where the mind is awake but not active, a place where the body rests but feels gently alive. This horizon feels like the softest moment of the entire night, a meeting point between the depth of sleep and the clarity of waking. Slowly, warmth spreads through my awareness, an inner warmth that has nothing to do with temperature. It is the warmth of returning presence, the warmth of calm readiness. The brain shifts into its final transition, preparing to open the senses fully. But even now, the process remains slow and peaceful. No part of me is in a hurry. No part of me is rushed or pulled. Everything rises with gentle timing. Soon, the waking world will become clearer. Shapes will form. Sounds will sharpen. Thoughts will gather. But for now, I rest in the final glow of nighttime calm. It is a sacred quiet, a gentle threshold where the mind is free from both the weight of dreams and the weight of the day. And as I linger in this tender horizon, I feel grateful for how the mind drifts through the night, softening, weaving, and restoring, so awakening can arrive gently,